Hello everyone and welcome back to Millicraft. In today's episode, we are going to be going over all of the flower types in 1.21.5 and their dyes and a few other flower types that don't give dyes, as well as where you can find them all. So let's get started. Back in 2017, in the 1.12 World of Color update, Mojang gave us a whole bunch of colored blocks that we had never had before in the history of Minecraft, including concretes, concrete powders, terracottas, dyed terracottas, wool, you name it, we have just about all of the colors out there. And alongside that, over the years, we have been slowly gathering up until 1.21.5. Almost every single color is available through a flower. Almost. There's one very obvious one over my left shoulder there that does not have one, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So let's get started with our rainbow. With our rainbow, we're going to start with red. Now, keep in mind, all of these two tall flowers in Java are able to be bone mealed to get duplications. In Bedrock, you could do that also with the single flowers, but in Java, we can only do it with the two tall flowers and the less than one tall flowers. So our Wildflowers and our cherry blossom petals, those are the only ones that we can bone meal. The rest of them we have to find a farm for, or we have to go to the biome where they grow, bone meal the ground around them, make a farm, and duplicate them that way. And there's one way over there that is a little different than that too. So we'll get to that. But let's start with red. Red dye can be made with our two tall roses, which can be found in forests, our red tulips, which can be found in flower forests, poppies, that can be found just about anywhere in prairies, on meadow tops, in dark oak forests, and with iron farms, our iron golems drop those. But one thing that people forget about with red dye is actually the red beetroot. You can actually craft red dye using red beetroot. The next color on our list is orange. Orange can be created using red and yellow, or through an orange tulip, which also can be found in a flower forest. A torchflower, which you have to go dig up a sniffer, grow it up, and then the sniffer digs up the seeds. It's a time-consuming process, but you can make a farm fairly quickly once you get a couple of sniffers. And an eyeblossom, specifically an open eyeblossom, which you can only find at night. I do have tick speed off right now, hence the fact that B is frozen up there, because of the fact that these would close during the day, and they're going to give you a completely different color of dye when they're closed. So you can find these in pale forests, and they can be replicated. If you're farming any of these, they are going to take time, and they are going to take bone meal. It's going to take a little bit of extra time to grow some of these. Your best bet would probably be to farm up an orange tulip farm if you're doing that, if you need a lot of orange dye, or just replicate the red and the yellow to create orange, which is a doable thing in Minecraft. Speaking of yellow, we have sunflowers, which can only be found in sunflower plains, but those tend to be very close to the flower forest where the tulips grow, so you probably won't have too much trouble finding those if you can find a flower forest. Dandelions can be found just about everywhere as well, and wildflowers, which are new to 1.21.5. You can find these in a lot of the birch forest biomes, and they're very pretty, and they can be replicated with bone meal. Next up, lime green dye. Now, lime green can be created with green and white, or you can smelt up pickles, sea pickles specifically. These can be bone mealed, but they can only be bone mealed underwater on coral block. So it does take a little bit of time, but I have seen farms made of those to replicate them pretty fast if you have bone meal, but then you have to smelt them down to make the green dye. Sea pickles can only be found in warm ocean biomes and in amongst all of the coral, so make sure you bring a silk touch at the same time so you'll be able to replicate those. Also smeltable, and not a flower, of course, is a cactus. Cactuses do have a lot of farm types that you can create, and you can grow a lot of them very quickly, but you do have to smelt them up as well. So with the greens, you really have to cook up some pickles or some cactuses to get those colors. Cactuses can be found in both badlands and desert biomes. Make sure you bring sand for them to be on. It can be regular or red sand, but they only will grow on sand. Cyan. Cyan, thankfully, when the Sniffers were released, we got pitcher plants, and they are 2 tall flowers, so they do produce 2 cyan per flower. But you do, again, have to have a sniffer, and you have to plant them out, and you have to farm the sniffer's seeds, and they come in pitcher pods. Now you can also create cyan dye by using blue dye and green dye, which is kind of handy if you do not have the ability to get a sniffer and do that farm early game. Our next color is a light blue. Light blue's only flower that it replicates is the blue orchid. And honestly, I wish it did cyan dye. It makes more sense, but it is light blue. So a light blue orchid can only be found in swamps, but you can make a bone meal farm out in a swamp and get as many of these as you need. You can also make light blue using blue and white, and that will also work. Blue, cornflowers, and lapis lazuli are the 2 ways of getting blue dye. Now, cornflowers are available in flower forests, in regular forest, in fields, and in meadows. I would suggest if you need a lot of blue dye to find a patch of them in a flower forest or a meadow that grows specifically cornflowers, because then you can get a lot of them in a very little amount of time. Purple, womp womp, has no flowers. I feel like the allium should be purple, but it's not. And current state of 1.21.5, there are no purple flowers. But you can make purple dye using blue and using red in any combination of however you get the dye to make your purple color. Magenta. Magenta is not quite purple and not quite pink, which means you can mix purple and pink to get the color, or get it with a lilac, which will give you 2, or an allium. Both of these can do bone meal farms. You can just bone meal the lilac straight, or you can find a meadow or a flower forest where these grow. Those are the only 2 places that these alliums will grow. Pink has so many varieties so far where you can get pink from, if you don't want to use red and white dye to create it, which is another way of doing it. But we have peonies, which are 2 tall, which I'd recommend doing these. You can get them in forests and flower forests, and those are probably the easiest ways to get loads and loads and loads of dye. You can also get it from pink tulips, which are found in flower forests. You can get pink from cactus blossoms, which is probably the slowest way to get pink dye of all of these options, quite honestly. And from pink petals found in cherry blossoms in the cherry grove biomes. And those, they're pretty fast too. You can get quite a few. But I would say per 1 bone meal, you only get 1 pink dye, whereas with a peony, you'd get 2. With cactus blossoms, you can pretty much get them anywhere. Growing up cactuses, there are some farm designs, but it is all dependent upon tick speed and whether or not the cactus will actually grow a flower. So I would save these for your decorating and for special projects, and probably don't use them for dye. Next up is white. White dye has exactly 1 type of flower, and that is the lily of the valley. They are pretty rare. You can find them in flower forests and in pockets in regular forests and birch forests. Sometimes you can create a bone meal farm of them. They have been broken for a while. I'm not sure if they fixed that in 1.20, 1.5 or not. So if you cannot find a way to replicate these, the easiest way to get white otherwise is from bone meal itself. Bone meal itself can be turned into white dye, and a lot of people now have moss farms or a skeleton farm, skeleton XP farm, and you can just take your bones and create them into bone meal and then create the bone meal into the white dye. Light gray dye is actually pretty easy to come by because it comes from a lot of flowers that are very easy to find in prairies, in forests, in flower forests, and meadows, such as the Azure Bluet, which for some reason kind of looks blue but is light gray, our white tulips found in flower forests, and the Oxeye daisies, which are also found in prairies and in woods, forests, and those sort of biomes. You can also find them in meadows from time to time, depending on how much light gray dye you might need. But you also can create it using 2 white to a black dye to create the light gray dye. Gray dye, just recently with the Pale Forest update, got a flower type to go along with it. This is an Eyeblossom that is closed. This is how they actually look like during the daytime versus the one that's open and produces the orange dye. So if you want to get these, you can go and bone meal the area around a pale oak forest and get a whole bunch of these during the day. And you can create the gray dye, but you can also create gray using black and white. Black dye is one of the more time-consuming dyes to get, quite honestly. Either you can get it the most easy way, which is a squid farm, or just farming squids in open oceans and river biomes. You do have to probably use a looting sword of some sort to be able to get a lot of these, or you can make up a farm in a river biome. It does take a lot of work to do that, though, so keep that in mind. Another way to get black dye is the black wither rose. Now, it would normally have little particles coming off here because they can poison you, but I do have a tick off right now, so the time, he's still frozen up there. You can create a wither farm with snow golems under the end, and there are some other variations of this to be able to get multiples of these flowers. You can only get these if a wither kills a mob and it drops one of these, and it is pretty hard to come by, so you do have to create a farm to get those. Our last color is brown, and it is gotten with a cocoa bean, which can be found in jungle biomes, which is like the only one of these that can only be found in the jungle. Cocoa beans obviously are not a flower, but that is the only way you can come by brown dye. Cocoa beans can only be grown on these jungle logs, so make sure if you grab a whole bunch of cocoa beans that you're also grabbing some of the jungle wood so that you can grow them. You can also make farms out of them fairly easy with some pistons and a redstone, and they can be bone mealed to make them grow faster if you need a whole lot of brown real fast. In order to show you the last few of these, I decided to turn on our tick speed so that we could actually get the particles from the Spore blossom. The Spore blossom is the only flower in Minecraft that is non-duplicable. Like, you can't duplicate this. You literally have to go find them in the wild, and they're rare. You have to go into a lush cave to find them, and then you have to pluck them off the ceiling, and you have to gather them very carefully by hand. What's weird too about them is they're the only flower that doesn't produce dye, excluding these fellows over here. So you don't get pink out of this, even though they are pink. So you want to save them for the ambiance of the green particles that float around in the air. Now, a few other things that are flowers but don't seem like flowers that I wanted to add to this list are azalea bushes, azalea leaves, cherry blossom leaves, and the chorus flower. Now, all of these flower types, if you pluck these up, you can actually, where'd our bee go? You can actually direct a bee with some of these flowers. Where did he go? Did he go up there? Let's take our bee. And you can actually use these flowers to pull bees around. So they are technically flowers, including the flowering azalea. I'm gonna pull this guy and this guy. So any of these will catch the attention of a bee, which means they are, in fact, flowers. Now that we have gone over all of the different colors and flower types available in Minecraft, let's go see them in the real world, as in, you know, the actual Minecraft world and not a flat world like this is. Welcome on over into a real brand new load-in of Minecraft, and next to us is our very first flower, which of course is a poppy. And right in front of me I have a blue cornflower and dandelions right there, and I believe we have spawned into a prairie, so we'll check it out. Nope, we are in a plains biome. Let's take a look, and I am in flight mode. We are in creative mode just to see all of these things faster. So right here, out in the middle of these plains, poppies, Azure Bluets, Dandelions, your Oxeye Daisies, and your blue Cornflowers are all available right here. And you could put a shaker farm, and I know there's a lot in there. Just look up flower farm on YouTube to find an example of one. I'm not a redstone person, so a place like this would be perfect to farm all of these flowers. As we fly over a forest area, we find our first lilacs. And just across the river from where the lilacs were are our first peonies. Also hidden deep within the forest are our lily of the valleys. And let's do a test to see if they have been fixed or not. Maybe they've been fixed, maybe they haven't. I'm not sure that these lilies have been fixed yet, at least not in the forest biome. They don't seem to be replicating with our bone meal. We're just getting more poppies, unfortunately. Over here, tucked a little bit further into the forest, are our rose bushes. After doing a little bit of hunting, we have stumbled across a meadows biome. I forgot, wildflowers can also be found in the meadows biome, and this one has cornflowers as well as alliums. So this would be a perfect area to replicate both your blue and your magenta dyes just by doing a quick shaker farm. And you can also take home plenty of these little yellow wildflowers with you. Something to keep in mind about meadows is, unlike that one where we have purple and blue, we can also have yellow and blue. And almost all of the flowers can be found in a meadow of some sort, minus the lilies and the two tall flowers and some of the more rare ones like orchids. But you can find poppies, you can find the dandelions, you can find oxeye daisies, the azure bluets, the cornflowers, and the alliums, all on these mountain meadows. Now, one thing I forgot to mention while I was going over our flower types was how to find an azalea bush. Now, wandering traders can actually sell them, but you can also find them in warmer biomes. And what I mean by warmer, even though you wouldn't think a dark oak forest would be a warmer biome, oftentimes they are found underneath a dark oak forest or in a desert biome or in a badlands biome, and you can trail yourself all the way down, which we're going to go down underneath this azalea bush by following the rooted dirt from an azalea tree in order to find the lush caves that's buried below. Now, if we come down below that azalea bush using free cam, you can see that our lush caves can be found underneath those azalea bushes, and we can find our spore blossoms down here. And if we find, very dark here, but if we kind of look in this lit area, you can also find your azalea bushes to grow the azalea trees down here as well. Now, occasionally in our birch forests, you can also find the azaleas underneath, but you can find lots and lots of these beautiful wildflowers with tons of bees hanging out in this beautiful warm biome. Sneaking on into the swamp biome, you can find the firefly bushes, which aren't flowers, so I didn't count them in the list, but I do love them a whole lot. But what we can find here are our blue orchids. And you can create up a little shaker farm in an area such as this or anywhere in this kind of biome, and it should replicate quite a few of these blue orchids for you. Oh, and look! Here is a little pocket that's kind of rare for a plains biome that has the actual tulips. Now, these do not happen a whole lot. We're not actually in a flower forest here, we're actually in a plains, but on rare occasions, we can actually find tulips in plains biomes. And it's pretty rare, but you can sometimes find orange and red and sometimes pink and white tulips in these prairies. But let's see if we can find ourselves the flower forest where we can find a whole lot more of them. Here is an example of a flower forest. A flower forest is like a regular forest in a lot of ways, has the same kind of tree types, but we see all of our beautiful tulips here in large quantities. And if you kind of look around, flowers grow in big patches. So we have a white tulip patch here, a pink tulip patch there. We have a big patch of pink over here, the Oxeye daisies. We have the orange tulips kind of spreading through here. The red are over there. There's our Azure Bluets, our Alliums. And then you can also find a lot of our too tall flowers here, like the Peonies. And there should be, if we're lucky enough, there might even be a patch of the other flowers, like there's some more Alliums right there. And just like I mentioned, unfortunately, this is the tiniest little sunflower fields biome ever, but as you can see, they're right across the way from the flower forest, so oftentimes you can find them together. And you can even find the cornflowers in this area as well. And if you make up little shaker farms or little wash farms with bone meal in these little patches, you will be able to create tons and tons of these flowers. Have the cherry grove, and you can get the pink petals here as well as the cherry blossoms, and they're cherry trees. Now over here in our desert biome, and look at this terrain generation is absolutely crazy, we find our cactuses and our cactus blossoms. Now, a flower will stop the cactuses from growing, so if they spawn a flower, they'll stay that height permanently, so you can also use that to stop a cactus from growing if you want it to stay a certain height. To get your brown dye, you will need to find a jungle biome, and they're usually not this crazy, but right here on this tree, and look, there's actually kind of a broken one here. This cocoa bean is growing on a dirt block and not an actual block here of jungle log. But they're easy enough to plant and replicate a bunch more. In order to find your sea pickles and your sniffers, you're going to have to find a warm or a lukewarm ocean. And the sea pickles will be very obvious down on the bottom because if they're in water, they will glow. And they can be found all the way in through this warm ocean biome. And also it can be found in warm ocean biomes are these underwater ruins. Now you have to find the ones with sand specifically to find the sniffer eggs. But let's take a look at a few of these. And you might have to find quite a few before you find one that actually has an egg. Aha! I think this was my third one before I was able to find an actual sniffer egg. And you will need 2 to breed them up. But typically, no, that's just an axe, so we don't have to worry about that. So you'll need to kind of go around the area, and that is a very lonely little, very lonely little guy there. But once you get an egg, you can raise up your sniffer and make a farm out of it to be able to collect the seeds for the torchflowers and the pitcher plants. And once you got your sniffer and he's dug up your flowers, you can plant the pitcher pod in soil. You can also plant your torchflower seeds to make them grow, and if you need them to go faster, we can bone meal them. Ta-da! And the pitcher pods will stay on the root base so long as they stay there, and the moment you break them out, they will become this flower instead of the one with the pod. The pale forest is where we find our eyeblossom flowers. And at the moment, they are all closed, so let's turn off the daytime. Let's go time set night. And watch as these beauties open right up and produce our orange dye. And they look really creepy all the way out there in the dark where the ever scary creaking lives. This is actually the biggest patch of these I've ever seen, however. Bone meal enough around here. Haha, there we go. We can get all of the eyeblossoms that you want. So this might be a farm, depending on what color of dye you want, to run either during the day or the night. One of the biomes that we can't get to on the overworld, and you do have to defeat a dragon to get to, is for your chorus flowers. Now, chorus flowers are a little weird, because if you were to break a chorus plant, it's going to break the whole thing and not drop the flower. It's just going to drop all of these chorus fruit. However, if you take and you use an axe or you use an arrow and you chop down the flowers, and of course I'm not in survival right now, you can get yourself a chorus flower, and that will grow on the end stone if you want more flowers. Now, mind you, when a flower is open, it's going to look like this. When it's closed, it's going to look like this. So, for the most part, you can't really decorate with them as flowers unless you continually let them grow like this and keep them active. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial and learned a little bit of the flower types in Minecraft 1.20, 1.5. Also, I didn't mention there's a lot of good things that you can do with bees and flowers. Maybe we can do an episode on bees at some point. But for now, I hope you enjoy. I hope you find a lot of interest and find so many uses for all of the flowers in Minecraft. And I hope this has been educational for you for finding all of these beautiful items that you can use to decorate in your world. And I didn't even mention, you can actually put any one high flower in a pot if you need to decorate with them. Keep in mind, 2 tall flowers will not go in a pot, nor will flowers that are shorter than 2 tall. But any flower that is 1 tall can go in a flower pot for decoration, including cactuses. Love you all very, very much. I hope you all have a fantastic week. If you haven't subscribed, please leave a like, subscribe, leave me a comment, and let me know what other tutorials you might like to see in the future. Thanks for watching. See you next time.